Take roll call.
Afif,
Here.
Falk, Gorman,
Here.
Pappas,
Here.
Opie, Lawson,
Here.
Hemphill.
Here. All right, I need a request or a motion to motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have no public comment. And so now we'll go to you, Dan, to introduce the two architects that we'll have tonight.
So I have two firms presenting tonight, 15-minute presentations, Q&A right after that. Jim Woods and team from FGM will be first.
My name is Jim Woods. I'm a principal and board member of FGM Architects. We are extremely excited to be here this evening to be included in your architectural selection process. I'd be the principal in charge for FGMA and lead the master planning, programming, and referenda support services. My background in PK-12 now surpasses 40 years, unfortunately. And I'm an accredited learning environment planner from the Association for Learning Environments and was recently named a fellow in that organization this past fall. The rest of the team that we have here this evening includes Troy Kerr, who will be our project manager and your day-to-day contact for the project. Mike Denz, who will lead design efforts, and Nesma Hamuda, who will be the project architect for projects. Brian Ogle, who is the technical architect, or senior technical architect for the project, was unable to be here this evening because of a prior commitment. We are extremely passionate about the work that we do for school districts and clients and the positive impact we can have on students, faculty, and administrators. You could say you're getting the A-team with us. We would team with your preferred civil and mechanical engineers, IMAG and Erickson, as well as McCluskey Engineering. All of those firms are firms that we have had extensive experience with. We recommend a district has a referendum consultant to deal with PR, do community surveys, and all those kinds of things, as we find that it's very self-serving, appearing to have an architect lead that process. Quickly reviewing our agenda for this evening. We're going to tell you a little bit about us. Then we're going to tell you a little bit about what we understand about your context. And then we'll talk about a master planning and referendum process that we think is transparent and can help build trust with your community. And finally, we'll talk about our approach to actually taking a project from its vision to its final completion, and open it up for questions and answers. FGM, been around for a while, and we've grown quite big. But all of this team serves you out of our office in Westchester, Illinois. And two of our clients are Geneva to the east and Sycamore to the west. So we're in this area all the time and proud of working with those clients. Been with both of those clients for 20 plus years now. Again, a larger firm, so we have the capability to stretch to take on a lot of stuff, but this team would be very focused on your work. We also work with districts large and small, approximately 100 plus PK-12 clients, 76 of those are in Illinois and 20 plus of those are in Northeast Illinois. Many of our clients are in Southern Illinois, not served by our office here, but served by our St. Louis area offices. And again, we work with districts large and small, urban and rural, and have a great understanding of the differences in those communities. Mike, why don't you describe some of our recent design work?
Hi, everyone. We wanted to share one slide with you, just recent projects that we've done, knowing that you are all a unit district as well. So these are examples of some PK through 12 grades here. And, you know, we know one of your goals as a district is to create a community and support a community that is about connection and belonging, so inclusivity. And we're huge believers with the architecture that we do in designing of learning environments, that is an opportunity to design a space that can truly support that. And these are just a few examples here that include different strategies to help promote that sense of belonging through the architecture and the learning environments. You could see examples here of, in the center there with the glass windows is a high school STEAM lab where you're introducing transparency and you're putting learning on display for all to see. And it really starts to break down the walls of the school and get away from that institutional feel and really have that connection visually. Of course, there's concerns there with safety and security, and there's many different strategies that we could put in place to help mitigate that and be sensitive to that and make sure that students and teachers, we're easing their anxieties too, because you want to be relaxed to really focus and learn. A few other strategies here too is also thinking about neurodiverse students and understanding that a lot of students, they learn differently, and that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. And designing spaces that truly support that, you want to have flexible spaces. So variety of furniture. If a kid needs to fidget in a chair, they're able to have that type of chair to fidget and be able to focus and self-regulate themselves. Other examples too are just flexible spaces, different scale spaces. Kids that want to be part of a larger group, they're sitting off to the back, maybe in a little nook area like you can see on some of these photos here, but just really bringing in that variety into the learning environment is very important. Troy will speak next.
But so more important than what we've done is what we could do with you. And we understand that part of this process, a critical part of this process in supporting your goals, is to reestablish trust with your community, as Jim mentioned earlier. And we think that we can do that best through a process of master planning and referendum support. So typically, we split this up into 5 steps. It starts at the beginning with research, getting to know you, to know your district, to know the stakeholders that you serve and the students and staff that work in your schools every day. And it ends with a decision that everybody can support. But the part in the middle is the important part. Those 3 steps in the middle, that's the community engagement part. And that's the part where we will meet with all of your different stakeholders. Again, staff, students, administrators, community members, to determine what their needs and desires are and how they feel that your facilities can best serve your community. We think that a good master plan is made up of 3 different components that it focuses on. Number 1 is the infrastructure. That's the obvious part, right? The buildings that serve your students and your community. But the second part is educational adequacy, how they do that. And Mike will touch on that again in a couple of minutes. And the third part of that master plan is, again, that critical piece of district and community engagement, making sure that your community feels heard and that they feel like what you're planning on doing supports what they envision for the community in which they live. Mike?
So we like to think of all of these items up on the screen here as the prime ingredients that go into making a high-quality learning environment. And we're always bringing these into the conversations with teachers, with the community, both understanding what's currently working well in their classrooms and learning environments today, and as we prepare for the future, how should we address those future needs, all thinking about these ingredients at the same time and making them part of the conversation. Size, for example, is a huge one. Ensuring that we're not overbuilding or underbuilding. We understand that, construction has a square footage cost, and we want to be mindful of that. And our approach is with size, we're always benchmarking to various state standards, including ISB with square foot per student for different types of learning spaces, as well as other Midwestern states as well. That really helps us kind of hone in on what's the right fit for your district. But also, a few other things here too. A lot of these elements are based in evidence-based design. For example, views and natural light, we all know that has a huge impact on the learning environment and improves test scores, and those are things that we're continually discussing about with your current buildings and as we prepare for, new projects and renovations and additions as well. Also acoustics and ventilation, understanding that younger kids, their ear canals aren't as developed as some older kids might have a hard time hearing. Well, what are the mechanical systems like? How noisy are those mechanical systems? Do they have a lot of ambient background noise? Those are all questions that we dive into with teachers, staff, and community throughout the process.
So you might ask, how do we involve students, faculty, administrators, the community in this process? We really see that there's three primary mechanisms to do that. One is a site committee at each of the schools that represents that school, made up of principal, director of operations and facilities, teachers, students, parents, neighbors, architect, and construction manager. And their function is to tell you what the needs of that school is, and then to vet potential solutions to any issues that might occur at that site. The second piece of that is the community group. And in this process, we invite anyone in the community to participate in that process. And we have had in Geneva, when we did this in mid-2000, 2005, we had over 200 people participating in those community meetings. And we break them up into small groups so that we can get their input throughout that process. But we see that as being representatives of all aspects of the community. We often tell you that you should invite those people who are the leaders of the opposition as well as the leaders of the pros to both participate in that process, because getting them together and on board with a single direction ultimately is the way you need to do this to get to a successful referendum. And then the third piece is really a district task force. It's made up of administration, board representatives, site committee representatives, community committee representatives, the architect, and the CM. And that task force is charged with filtering all the input from the site committees and from the community to ultimately formulate a recommendation up to the district administration and to the board.
So stakeholder engagement could take on many different activities and ways to engage community and teacher groups, students as well. And, you know, for example, working through some of the community forums, there could be opportunities there to update the community on the current state of the facilities. What are some of those challenges and pain points that you're having today? As well as then having some visioning sessions where we're thinking about the future, and we're putting your current facilities and the state they are aside, and we're thinking about what do students and teachers need to support student outcomes as they move in from elementary to middle school to high school, college, and career and workforce beyond, and starting to identify what those gaps are with your current facilities, and that starts to inform the roadmap or that master plan for the future there. So, you know, a few of these kind of fun, interactive type of forums and workshops where we're printing large-scale site concepts out onto the gym floor. I remember this one here, we had 3 different concepts. We were just kind of pulling and doing overlays at a really large scale, walking around with different groups in the community, recording all the different feedback and the comments, and, you know, eventually kind of summarizing those as we prepare our report out. But also with teacher groups in that lower right corner, red dot, green dot voting, where we're looking at inspirational images and images of successful learning environments and talking about what they like, what they don't like, really kind of getting them to voice you know, their concerns and their frustrations about maybe spaces they're in now, and looking at them in a completely different lens. And then lastly, you know, engaging those students, talking about what school means to them, and where do they feel, you know, safe in the school, and what spaces do they gravitate towards, and how would they like to see their schools develop over time.
So those 3 primary steps in the process in the middle there: vision, program, and options. Vision really is about establishing what your values are, what your priorities are. Program has really got to do with the issues of capacity and how you deliver education and the condition of your existing facilities. Options is where we'll develop multiple ways of addressing those programmatic needs. And then going through that decision-making process is really about vetting what's the best one, what best meets your values and your program. This process we've worked with very successfully over the years. Most recent referendums that have passed include the Glenview School District 34 $119 million referendum that is in its final phase of construction now. And then most recently, the Salt Creek School District $48 million referendum that the project just went out for bids, or just got bids back, I should say. And as I said, we've worked in Sycamore and Geneva doing this process, building to successful referenda that resulted in extensive building programs. It's something that's worked very well for us and for the communities that we've worked in.
So defining a successful project, as your project architect, it is my role to work with you and bring your vision to life through collaboration. So I'm excited to get to know your staff members and your facilities in the process. We'll get to do fun and exciting things like be creative and think of big ideas, but we'll also work through any challenges that come along the way, all in pursuit of improving the facilities. And as it's been mentioned, in the design process, we'll chat with staff members, community members, really any key stakeholders that will help us assure that the goals are being met. And ideas will evolve along the way, and eventually we'll get to a point where we'll have a thoughtful and detailed project. And then personally for me, my favorite part of the journey is really when we get to a point when the things that we've been having conversations about and that live in our drawings start to be realized in a built form. So it's a very proud moment to be able to turn the project back over to your team and start to see that next generation of users and interactions start to occur in the space. And yeah, I'll turn it back over to Troy.
All right, so in closing, we think that we're the perfect partner for you. We have a long track record of doing this type of work, serving communities just like yours. It's something that we're passionate about. It's something that all of us have dedicated our careers to, and we look forward to the opportunity to work with you. Any questions?
So at the beginning, you mentioned something about community engagement and referendum support. And I heard something about like you think that the referendum support should be somebody else, but then I heard a lot of stuff that seems to be supportive of referendum. So can you explain?
We do referenda support in that we create materials that the district can utilize to explain to people what the referenda is all about. But we think strongly that having an architect out there as the leader in the community, telling people this is the right thing, leading that process is the wrong message because it seems very self-serving for the architect to be out there. We think that somebody who is professional in public relations and can do community polling, community surveys, who is gathering that kind of data on a continuous basis throughout the process is best working with the district to lead that process.
Okay, and then if in the communities where you've worked, where there are, referendum issues on the table, are there organizations that you work with or that you would recommend to us for us to consider?
Yeah, we've worked with 2 or 3 different referenda consultants. Creative Entourage is one, Sullivan is another. So there's like 3 or 4 out there who mostly service Northeast Illinois who do a really good job with that.
And then you mentioned that you're a large firm. This team is out of the Westchester office. So I don't know if this is important or not, but it's something that I'd like to know. What percentage of your office represents K through 12?
So as a firm, roughly 50% of the work the firm does is K-12.
Okay.
And certainly out of Westchester, it's right about 50%.
Probably about 50%. So again, our tagline is that we build community, and that's because all of the projects that we do are community-serving projects. Mm-hmm. So about 50%, as Jim mentioned, are PK-12 projects. The other 50% are made up of municipal projects like police stations, fire stations, park districts, town halls, as well as higher ed and faith-based work as well.
Okay. So, thank you.
Out of curiosity, what are you building for Glenview and Salt Creek for 119 and 48?
So for Glenview, that's actually one of my projects. I'll have Nesma talk about Salt Creek in a second because that's one of her projects. But Glenview, we were brought in because their facilities were very outdated. They needed a lot of work. They didn't have the money to support it without going for a referendum, and so they opted to go for a referendum, not just for what they needed for maintenance purposes, but to go for more of what they dreamt of in terms of educational delivery. And so bringing full-day kindergarten into the program was something that they'd never had. Modernizing their middle schools was something that was really a goal for them. And so we touched every classroom in the district. They have more than 430 classrooms throughout the district where we modernized those. Most of those had not had significant work since the 1980s. So it was pretty much a soup to nuts modernization of pretty much every facility in the district.
Salt Creek was a little bit more need-based, so they had huge security and accessibility issues at the 3 schools in the district. I think 2 out of the 3, when you enter the building, it's in the middle of a stairway landing, and so huge accessibility issue. And then the administration offices were nowhere near the entrances. So really it was driven, the primary reason was driven by security upgrades. And then from there, they had, I think, 3 tiers, and tiers 1 through 2 were accepted. So the first one was security, and then the next one was really just needs outside of that. And so we are doing the gym reconstruction, so totally tearing down their existing, which lacked size, and again, building on security, their locker rooms, they were having similar visibility issues, and so rebuilding that in a much larger footprint, same spot, just to give them better facilities there.
Thanks.
What have you learned about our district and our needs, and what do you see as our greatest challenge?
So what we know about your district is that you have elementary schools, middle school and high school. We know that you've got growing enrollment and there are pressing enrollment needs at certain locations. We know that the community was very divided about the proposal to build a new high school, and that there are many that think a different approach to the facility needs for the district might be warranted. And so that's why we propose a master planning, public engagement process to truly figure out what are the real options for meeting it, vetting those options with the community, and getting people sort of going in the same direction, as opposed to trying to kind of continue a divided camp approach.
Thank you.
With all of your projects with the schools, have you ever helped the districts with grants, or are you familiar with the grant process for?
Sure. We're not a dedicated grant writer, so we'll just throw that out there, but they are things that we work with all the time. So, from the small to, school maintenance grants, we work with all of our clients to pursue those on a yearly basis. Up to the very large, we worked with one of our clients to secure a grant that was nearly $2 million to help renovate a building that in a method that they were looking for was something that was very environmentally driven. But so, yes, we are very familiar with that process and ready to step in and support you in pursuit of those grants.
And obviously, back in the day when we had statewide school construction grants, we assisted literally all of our clients in getting grants. And I'll hope that
With the master planning, how long, we did a enrollment study? So is that something that you would be able to use? And would that, in any appreciable way, shorten the time frame for conducting a master plan?
Yeah, absolutely. We would take all of the information that you have on your facilities today. I'm assuming that Dan probably has a very good history and track record of all of the facility issues that you have. And so we would incorporate all the information that he has into that process, things like demographic studies where you're looking at your enrollment and stuff like that. That's all part of that research phase where we're getting to know you. And we'll obviously go out and walk the buildings with Dan and his team to understand the buildings better as well. And then start that engagement process with teachers, administrators, students at each of the sites so that we can hear from them what they think the issues are.
So in a school district of our size, how long do you think it would take to do a master plan?
So the way I put that is we can go very fast, but it really has to do with what's logical in terms of timing for community engagement and stuff. We don't want to go too fast such that you're asking somebody to show up at a meeting every 2 weeks kind of thing, because people have their own lives, and baseball in summer and sports, basketball and stuff in the winter. But we want to go at a pace that's pretty quickly. So we probably need about a month up front to do that research phase, and then each phase is about a month. So we've contracted it all down to 3 months, but more typically it's 5 or 6.
Thank you.
And the more data you have, the quicker we can go.
And the earlier you engage the community, just the better the turnout, more opportunities they're going to have to be heard and be a part of the process too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you not have your phones going during the meetings? It's so rude.
That was very rude.
Watching.
I was just going to send Jay a
What was the
wrestling match.
score?
That's what I was doing. Did you hear the sound of the wrestling? Did you hear the wrestling background information?
I didn't hear it.
Oh, yeah, he's over here watching for you.
I heard something in the gym. I was like, what's the score?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Ryan's like, ooh, what do you
And
got?
as soon as the noise, I stopped, so I didn't send
We
it
see.
to you. Third period of a real tight match. I love it.
Goodness
Or second period,
gracious.
too.
Can't take him anywhere.
So this is Matt Verdon and his team from Wold.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. He's not here.
Yeah, he's not here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know you have the flag ready to roll.
Oh, you know
We
it.
are- All right. Well, thank you for inviting us into your community tonight. We really appreciate it, and we're excited about the possibility of a partnership with 301. We have a lot to get through tonight, so if it sounds like we're speed reading a little bit, give us a little, we'll take a breath here and there, but we want to share what we can to make sure that you know what our team's capable of. So I'm Dan Critta. I'm a partner with the company. I'll be serving as partner in charge for this effort, and thank you. I forgot to do that.
You gotta click.
Yeah, clicking. Anyway, if it's not clear, I'm the historian of the group. I've been with Wolt for 36 years, and through that time frame, been focused on K-12 education clients, helping them reach their visions. And the role I'll be playing here will be make sure that as a partner in the firm that I'm bringing the resources to the team to make sure that you're successful, but I'll also be playing a heavy role in the community engagement process and through the master planning process.
I'm Allison Andrews. I've been primarily focused on pre-K-12 education for my entire tenure at Wold. As the educational programmer, my responsibility is really to make sure that our planning and design processes are in alignment with your programmatic and educational goals. I really enjoy this part of what I do day to day just because it allows me to really engage with a broad group of stakeholders and bring their voices to the forefront of what we're doing each and every other day. So that way kind of the outcomes of every process is in an alignment with who you are.
And I'm Matt Verdon. I'm a mechanical engineer with Wold. I've been working with Wold for 23 years, primarily with school districts. And during that time, my roles kind of evolved from designing and drafting buildings in schools to now helping school districts plan and implement those projects. It's a role that I'm filling currently with Grays Lake, Crystal Lake, Flossmoor, a couple school districts along the way. As Dan mentioned, part of that role is also to make sure that we've got the full breadth of that team available when we need it. We've got tonight our planning team, because that's where we are as a district. We're not ready to start implementing projects yet. We need to figure out what we want to do first. So the rest of the people we've got listed there, that's on our implementation side, our project managers and our project team, as well as our out-house consultants we got listed. We've worked with them for literally decades, and we've worked with IMEG and Erickson for about that same amount of time. We're currently working on projects with them currently. So really, it's about bringing those resources to the team, and I talk about we because I'm actually a part of the community as well. My son Grayson is a first grader at Mrs. Pfeiffer's first grade class at Country Trails, so this is incredibly important to me personally to make sure that we're successful.
Just a little bit more about Wold as a firm. We're currently ranked number 9 in the country as a K-12 educational design firm, and really what's allowed us to grow to that level is our attention to customer service. We feel like we do that better than everybody else. We're working with 250 plus school districts across the Midwest. 50 of those districts are here in Northern Illinois. Some of them are your neighbors. We're working with St. Charles and Caneland. I know they touch your southern borders, but we're also working with some other peer districts as Huntley, Woodstock, as far out as McHenry and Crystal Lake and Glenbard. So large districts that have large district challenges that we can bring to the table, lessons learned from that aspect. But I also touch to our national team, so we share stories across the country, and there may be something that's working in one market that really is appropriate for discussion in your district as well. We're also a longstanding sponsor of LUDA. I know 301's a member of LUDA, but we really enjoy being at the front seat to understand the challenge that large districts in Illinois are going through. We recognized right away that there was some alignment in our culture of our firm with some of your educational objectives, and we know how important that is from a standpoint of empowerment and inspiration. Those pieces are part of our culture as we look to make a difference in the communities that we serve. So having that alignment, I think, is a really solid foundation to be a strong partner with 301. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on really the planning process. I know projects are important as well, but we think, based on what we know of the district, and Matt being a resident here, we think that the master planning process and that community engagement, that outreach, is really the first step in being successful in 301.
And that first step of any planning process is really understanding what are the challenges we're trying to solve. And we know we've got some challenges as a community. It starts with equity. We've got issues with equity as far as the curriculum and the extracurricular activities that we offer is not on par with our neighboring districts. We've got equity issues from building to building when you consider the vintage of Lily Lake and CMS compared to a Country Trails and a PK, and how are those students, do they have the same amenities in those different buildings? We also have equitability issues within our buildings themselves, where we have students that are in mobile classrooms and students that are in the building, and the challenges that come with how they get distracted as they move from the mobile classroom back to their specials in the building. If it's a rainy day or a cold day, there's distraction trying to get back to the focused on learning, and also the safety issues that come with being not in the brick and mortar building as well. All of those are today issues, and how we address those are going to be only amplified when we have growth coming with it. So we got to find solutions that are going to be scalable in a way that's going to address that growth, but also in a way that's going to, we need to come to those solutions in a way that's going to be very transparent. It's going to be heavy in community involvement, and it's going to be in a way that's going to allow the community to trust the recommendations that come from that master plan.
So with 56 years of working with school districts, we've kind of developed a master plan we think is very proven and is solid. It really relies on 2 steps. The first step is focus on facts, and we're going to talk about each of these topics in a little more detail. The second step is really focus on communication, collaboration, and engagement with your community, and make sure that they have a voice in the process. We know that community outreach is really important to have a successful have ownership in a solution moving forward. So we're emphatic about starting with the facts. You can't have a solid network and a solid communication at a master planning level if you don't have a basis of facts. They're defensible. They give that educational planning committee the backbone to make solid decisions. So we're going to talk about some of the process of gaining that information.
So the first tool that we wanted to touch on is an educational alignment assessment. Really, this process is about assessing how your facilities today are either enhancing or potentially creating limitations to the way in which you can deliver education to your students. So in order to do that process, really what we do is we meet with the building teams, with each building, and understand how are they utilizing it today? What opportunities do they see? What challenges might they be facing? Where are some of those inequities that, Matt has already identified, but where might there be others or kind of, on a scale, where do those fall? But also challenge those building teams to say, what might you do differently if you could? If you had space, how might you expand a program? Is there an activity that you just can't currently, accommodate because of some limiting factor? Let's unpack that, let's understand that. When we did this process with St. Charles, they went through a similar process. One of the important things for them was they wanted that staff and faculty voice to make sure it carried through the process too. This is the fact-finding phase, but once we get into that second step, how are those voices still be a part of the process? So what we did is we met with they had BLTs, building leadership teams, and asked those groups to actually prioritize our findings of the opportunities and the challenges. So that way, when we presented that data to the Long Range Planning Committee, their voices were represented in that group as well at a larger stage.
Capacity enrollment is another fact-based piece that we need to, and especially in a growing district. And we know that you've worked with RSP. We have a long relationship with RSP. We worked with them in D15 as they went through additions and renovations and a referendum, as well as boundary changes. More recently, we've worked with them in St. Charles as they really came on board to help with the boundary change discussion. So we speak their language. We understand what functional capacity is, and I think the outcome that they've provided in the report of functional capacity is probably the most conclusive piece that really helps us understand how much space do you have in your buildings. The image on the left is just a page out of their report, and they talk about functional capacity. And at 3 of your elementary schools, you're going to crest over that functional capacity in the upcoming years. And we understand that that's going to put pressure on the building even more so than there is currently. We did a very similar exercise in St. Charles to understand not just the capacity of every building, but also how does some of the things that Allison was talking about, those inequities within the schools or between buildings that fall into there. So we created a heat map that helped the community and the administration understand where some of the challenge areas spatially, not just from an enrollment standpoint, but also from an adequacy standpoint.
Another aspect we want to look at is operational analysis, because as we make these decisions, it's going to impact your operations. So we want to take a look at things like, if we start to look at moving students from one building to another, how does that impact your transportation costs? We're also signatories to the AIA 2030 Challenge, which means that we're working with all of our clients and facilitating conversations on how to provide sustainable solutions. So we want to filter that into those discussions as well to make sure that we're finding ways to save on utility bills as well. We also know that Dan and his team are working on updating the capital facility improvement plan in the next year or so. We want to make sure we're a part of that, and the timing of it really wants to align with the master plan as well, to find ways to make sure that the physical conditions of the buildings support what you're doing educationally, and also can help to mitigate some of those equity imbalances that we talked about. It's also important from a budgeting standpoint to make sure that we got the dollars when we need them and where we need them. And Dan will be an integral part of that process as we start to work through it, try to filter that information and set priorities to what's important and how to time it out. We want to make sure that, if we've got, let's say, for example, an air handling unit that is maybe at the end of useful life, and we look at it from a life cycle only standpoint, it's ready to be replaced. But if it's in good shape and hasn't had any maintenance issues, maybe we can delay that a couple of years and try to buy some more time with it. At the end of it, you'll have a deliverable that is not just a physical report that is going to be that snapshot in time of where you are today, which has got all the great graphs and charts and funding and all that fun stuff in it, and floor plans. But really the most important part is the database that comes out of that with each one of the issues, because that becomes the living document and the tool that you're going to use going forward over that course of that 10 years, because things change, right? Things break, things become our more urgent priority, and we got to push and pull that stuff to make the funding work and understand when it needs to happen.
We know how important also is to hear the diverse voices in your community. We've had great success with different ways of bringing those folks to the table and making sure that they have a voice in this process. Kaneland really, the top three there, Kaneland really focused on the listening sessions, the open houses, and the surveying in their last go-around up to their successful referendum. But there's a multitude of ways we can make sure we touch those voices and bring them to the table. It's also important to go meet people on their own terms, meet them in their own geographies. Don't have everything at one location. Make sure that we're giving them a voice where they feel comfortable. So we'll talk a little bit more in the long-range planning process, but we know how important this is. Sorry. Just a quick snapshot. These are districts that went through a master planning process with us over the last 4 or 5 years. All but one went out to referendum successfully. And it shows on the spectrum different approaches, where some are more internally driven to the right side and some are more community driven. So it's more of an informative approach versus a more collaborative community engagement approach. So we know that there's everything across that spectrum can work just to what fits for your district. I'm losing another my screen there. What'd you do? Great question. No, it wasn't snapping forward. Did it freeze up? It would be unusual for me to mess up technology. That's part of my historian attitude or mindset.
I'm not even still. Here. Keep saying it can't connect.
Yeah, I mean, this laptop jumped right into it. I don't know, so that you have your slides, I can put them on this computer or something.
Sorry for the delay.
Clock is ticking.
We've got a really cute picture of Matt's son here.
I know, we saw that at the start. Oh, did you that?
I thought he should have been here. Good for him to start getting exposure to a board meeting early, right?
Right?
Exploitation.
Oh, that's fair, that's fair.
I got a draft for this.
Does anyone have any questions so far? If we have something you're going to jump to at the end.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so, what percentage of your practice with the group that would work with us is focused on K through 12?
The group is here tonight is exclusively K-12.
Exclusively?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our management team, as we get down through the project folks, project manager also exclusively in the K-12. And then we would start to see a few people that maybe cross to their government sector too, just depending on how we ramp up our team. But the people at the leadership levels are all focused on K-12.
Okay.
Would you say like 50% of you all is K through, not just your team, but just the business in general, is about K through 12, or is it?
Yeah, it's closer to 2/3.
Oh, 2/3.
Historically, we've been tracking about 60 to 70%, depending on the
Okay.
year, all focused on K-12 education. The remainder is also public sector government side, and we do have, in a couple of our offices, have a healthcare and senior living component too, but the bulk of our work is public sector.
Gotcha, okay.
And your team's office is located where?
We're in Palatine.
Palatine.
Yep. Everybody here is local, as is our team. We'll all be people that are in our Palatine office. Occasionally bring in resources from other offices if there's a specific talent or expertise that they can bring to the table, but most of the work here will be all done locally.
Game on.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm sure it was me. Always is. So one of the things that we promote and we believe strongly in is creating a facility planning committee. And with that, we've understood that once you have the facts in hand, it's really important to have people that are willing to come to the table. And that usually sweet spot is around 40 to 60 people, but we've had groups of up to 100 in a facility planning committee. So that's our next level of community engagement. Now, one of the things we found really successful is to break that group into focus groups and let them gravitate to the passions or the topics that they're really important to them, whether it's planning or facilities or facility conditions. So we create subgroups. You see this here. This is the model that we went through with St. Charles and their master plan, which started about right at the beginning of COVID. But what was nice is that those smaller groups allowed people to feel less intimidated and speak their mind, especially if it was something that they were really near and dear to them. The goal of this process is to get to a point where we're agreeing on needs, very critical part. Allison will talk a little bit about that, but also get to an option that is really the best fit for the district, and that this committee will recommend that to the school board for consideration at some point in the process. There's also some opportunities to bring the community back in as a forum. Usually we like to do that around the point where we've got the needs list and at the option development, and then again at the point where they're going to take a recommendation. So you have one more litmus test with the community of, is this the right plan? I'll let you switch it.
All right, so just going to touch a little bit on kind of these four subsets to that, starting with that needs agreement and that criteria. So a large district like Central, there's going to be a lot of needs and wants that come out of that data collection find. And the process is really geared towards taking that information and really transforming it into what are our needs and what are some criteria for how we would want to move forward. Some examples up here that kind of showcase some of the different topics and categories, alignment with those focus groups that Dan was just hitting on. But the critical piece of this is, as we're looking at that information, is that the group needs, the committee needs to come to consensus and agreement on those needs and consensus on the prioritization. When we were doing this in St. Charles, the question was asked, how do we prioritize? You know, everything's important, right? And so what we did was we worked with them to establish a language that really worked for them, that was do now, do soon, or do later. And we used that language and that model to then take all of that information and transform it into a roadmap that they could take on moving forward. So when I say that there's that big, nice red stop sign, we can't move forward from here. As we say in our office, if needs will unite us, but those solutions will truly divide us. If we don't have consensus, the options are going to be endless, and we won't really know where to start and how to kind of come to that best solution Dan was talking about. So this is actually sort of just a graphic of how that looked with their do now, do soon, do later, and it really did become a roadmap for us to use as we went into the option development phase. Option development is exactly as it sounds, right? We are test fitting different scenarios and seeing how they align with the goals and the vision. So as I mentioned before, we've got to have that consensus, so that way when we're evaluating those scenarios, are they addressing the needs that we've agreed to? Are they in alignment with our prioritization? If not, that's probably an indicator that maybe that particular scenario isn't the right fit for us. And we should go back and continue to, evolve the plan. But ultimately, it's coming to a point where you have information on how is this going to impact each of our buildings, how is this going to impact any of our specialized programs. And for Caneland, they also took it a step further and said, we also need to have a strategy for how will we implement this? How can we tier our implementation, because they were going to be going forward and engaging with their community and go out for referendum, and they knew that we kind of had to have a what is that first step, and what would be a second and a third?
Just quickly, lots of ways to fund projects. We know that you've pursued the bond pathway, but it's really critical to understand, parallel with the master planning process, what funding options you have, because ultimately, one of the criteria that you weigh these options on is going to be cash. It's going to be the money that you can access and leverage. So we understand that. When you go down that referendum path, we've got great success stories. We've passed in the last 15 and helped districts pass over $5 billion worth of work. That's a corporate number, but we really have a technique of helping districts, and there's two sides of the fence in that push to get the message out. There's the fact side, which is the administration and district employees and speaking to the public from a real informative side, but there's also the emotional side, which is your yes committee, and they can go out and actually say, vote yes for this, and give them the reasons why. We know how to help create media for both of those messaging tactics as you move into that campaign. The one thing we created this very similar to Canelan. They just used this in the last referendum, but it was an 8-week, basically a task list to march forward and say, what does that yes committee need to be doing on a daily, weekly basis to make sure that they're getting the word out and the messaging out. So this was a successful playbook for them that we created.
So once we get that successful referendum, it's time to start delivering on the project. And I'm going to fly through this just for the sake of time, but really what it comes down to is, look, the firms you're interviewing, they're all completely qualified to design and construct buildings. We think what sets us apart is our client experience. We very much focus on that and want to make sure that that's a good experience for you as a district. And that really involves all that participatory planning we just talked about. We take that same approach to our projects as well and make sure that we're having an inclusive process for that. So we want to get feedback from your district leadership, your building leadership, your staff, and your students, and implement that into the project all along the way. And with that, brings us to our closing remarks. I cannot stress enough how much we want to be your architect, how much I want to be your architect and work on that team as a parent in the district. I think that we are the best team. We bring not only a depth of experience from across the Midwest and Chicagoland, but literally up and down the Randall Road corridor with your neighbors. And we've been successful at implementing and planning projects for all of them for many, many years. And I think that it's my job is going to be to make sure that we have those resources and that full breadth and depth of our entire company at your disposal and ready to make this successful. So with that, we will open it up to questions.
So with the master plan, what do you anticipate the timeline, or not the timeline, the time frame to conduct that for us?
Sure.
Yeah. It does vary, but usually a master plan process can take 8 to 9 months where you're going to have that community engagement. We would add the first 3 or 4 months, we want to make sure we have that fact finding done and the fact book and at their disposal for those meetings. And then it's usually be 4 to 5 months on a master planning process to have that community engagement involvement. So I would say 9 months. It could go a month here or there, but that's really a kind of an average.
And then you divided up, I think it was the referendum portion where you've got the yes committee and then the administration side.
Yeah.
Is that at the referendum phase?
Yes.
Okay. And do you help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, in Canelan's most recently, we helped the administrative team create messaging and media and support boards so they could go out and it just simply got the information out. They were it had to be informative. It couldn't lean people into saying vote yes. On the flip side, the yes committee were a little more hands-off because it isn't intended to be self-serving, but we can put a framework for them so they're not starting in the dark. And there's campaign companies, there's specialists that you can also hire to really push that envelope even further. But we feel we at least give them that foundation so they know what to do in week 8, 7, 6, leading up to the election. We find that anything prior to a week 8 and further out tends to burn citizens advisor or a yes committee out. So that's kind of the sweet spot. But every district will dip in and will tailor that to help them out.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This is the Dan night.
This is the Dan Show.
Dan, show it.
I'm gonna need a breather.
You need a breather or the board?
Everybody does.
That was
a lot of information.
He's gonna need a breather coming all the way from the back of the room.
No, I see.
Thanks again.
No, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Now I'll try to send this without causing trouble here.
You gonna tell us the score?
Well,
It's probably over now.
the match is already over.
Yeah.
Oh, it's over, okay.
If it's not, those kids are real tired.
That's for sure.
All right, we'll move on to new business, mobile classroom options. Director Holloway. Provide some options for us on the mobile units and pole barns.
So the mobile pole barn conversation, we did evaluate the option of pole barns, obviously, because we built one for our transportation and buildings and grounds office building. But the difference is, as classroom space, it doesn't work quite the same way. So pole barns fall into a whole different permitting structure where you have to put in things in there that we wouldn't have to do in our office space, i.e. sprinklers and areas of evacuation and things of that nature. That's one factor. The other factor is location. All of our elementaries are landlocked. To find a place to put a permanent structure that would be of benefit to us in the future, we don't have the land to do that. Even at Country Trails, where we're going to be adding another mobile unit, that's the area of a future addition. By the time we put in a pole barn with a slab, put sewer and water, that did all those things, it's $1 million+ option, easily, where the mobiles are more cost effective. It's a temporary structure, so it's designed that way and it's permitted as a temporary structure, so they can be removed at the point we have another option, i.e. addition. So it's an option we evaluated, we definitely looked at, and it just, in working with the ROE, we've had numerous conversations with the ROE about it, trying to figure out what our best options are. I know some neighboring communities are going that way.
Kendall County.
Kendall County, yes, yep, and that, the main one is Kendall County, so it's not even in Kane County, so our ROE wouldn't even speak to how or what they're doing. I know it's $3 to $4 million that they're putting into that project, so that's kind of where that's at. So it's not something we didn't evaluate, believe me. I mean, we looked at every option that we could think of for a temporary solution, and mobiles is where we kept landing.
And remind us the cost of mobiles.
So the current mobile for the mobile itself is roughly $540,000-ish. Don't hold me to that. It's in that neighborhood. It's under $600,000 for the mobile itself. Then we have the utilities to hook up and the rest of it, and then the pump out washroom facility. So, yeah, said and done, we'll probably be in that $750,000 to $800,000 when we get electric hooked up and the connecting link and all the other parts to it.
And that's per mobile.
Yes, that's just for the Country Trails mobile, correct, that we're doing now, correct.
And how many classrooms? fit
That's
in that?
four additional classrooms.
And are you saying that right now, as far as the need, it's just Country Trails, or are you looking? or there's some other ones?
That's the current need
current
right at
need.
this time, as the multiple meetings we've had and discussions and looking at our student populations, that's where the imminent need is.
Yeah.
I know the foreseeable future, it's at every elementary.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we have space and infrastructure, i.e. power and things like that, to add mobiles to the other 3 sites. We had the foresight and the planning to kind of think through what that could possibly look like, knowing that there wasn't a lot of short-term options.
The mobiles we have currently at the elementaries, what's the shelf life? Like, I know we've had them for like a couple of years now.
20 plus years.
Oh, 20 plus
Yeah, yeah, the infrastructure in there, it's mechanical equipment.
Yeah.
Will and can fail, all those pieces, it's not as, obviously, as good as a brick and mortar structure,
Right.
but the infrastructure pieces will hold up 20 plus years. We've had the mobile at the high school for, it's got to be going on 9 or 10 years now.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Do you know what the yearly cost is for utilities and maintenance of those units?
I know The number I know offhand is it's roughly $10,000 a week that we spend on the water and waste in those units. That's for district-wide. That's for all 4 locations. So that's a cost I know of. As far as the electric and maintenance-wise, I don't have those numbers. It's probably, I would say, just off the cuff, it's not much different than just what we're doing in the building, you know, a classroom space. Yeah, they're each individual air conditioning, heating units, so it's not, you know, individually controlled thermostats, so there's not like a lot of utility waste, anything astronomical.
When you brought the ROEs, they said no.
They said it's not a short-term feasible option. If you're gonna do something like that, you better be looking long-term, and they said you might as well look at doing an addition if you're gonna spend that kind of money on a pole barn. You might as well put an addition on. You're gonna have to do the same permitting, same things are gonna have to be done.
All right, you'll talk to us about the lease of the.
Okay,
Oh,
there are limited things we can say about this, but we have a snafu in
Oh.
our current plan that you approved a year ago. And I can't get into the dollar and cents of it, and we have to talk about that in closed session. So, but we do have a problem, and we have a time problem, because they need to seed the property by May 1, latest May 15th. So the board needs to act on a proposal that is right in front of us right now. So, but because we're going to deal with the dollars and cents of it, and we have competitive people that would like to bid on this, I'd like to have closed session to discuss it.
okay,
That's all we had.
all right, adjourn to closed session. I need a motion second or required to adjourn open session and move to closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call vote is taken.
Gorman,
Yes.
Pappas,
Yes.
Pam,
Watson,
don't go away.
Yeah.
Afif,
Yes.
Hemphill.